At 11:14 a.m. on January 11, 1944, Major James Howard circled his P-51B Mustang 4 miles above Oschersleben, Germany, watching a nightmare unfold beneath him. 30 German fighters, a mix of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FDU-190s, were diving toward 60 unprotected B-17 flying fortresses. The bombers, part of the 401st Bomb Group, were completely alone. Howard's wingman had scattered during an earlier skirmish. The rest of the escort fighters had turned back at the German border, limited by fuel capacity. For the next 37 minutes, one American pilot would fight alone against overwhelming odds to defend 600 airmen. The 33-year-old Howard wasn't new to combat. He'd flown 86 missions with the legendary Flying Tigers in China, downing 6 Japanese aircraft. But today marked only his 37th day flying the controversial new P-51B, a fighter that military brass still called experimental and unproven for long-range escort duty. The 354th Fighter Group, Howard's unit, had been the first to receive the Merlin-powered Mustangs just 5 weeks earlier. They called themselves the Pioneer Mustang Group, testing an untested weapon in the deadliest skies on Earth. The need was desperate. Between August and October 1943, the 8th Air Force had lost 180 bombers in just 3 catastrophic missions over Germany. Without fighter protection past the German border, bomber formations were systematically slaughtered. On Black Thursday, October 14, 1943, 60 B-17s were shot down attacking the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. 600 airmen lost in a single day. The daylight bombing campaign nearly collapsed entirely. The desperate innovation. The P-51B represented a desperate gamble. By combining the American-designed airframe with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, engineers had created a fighter with unprecedented range. In theory, it could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back, something no Allied fighter had achieved. But theory and combat reality were different things. The brass worried about engine reliability over such distances, untested combat performance against veteran Luftwaffe pilots, and whether pilots could maintain combat effectiveness after hours in cramped cockpits. On December 5, 1943, the 354th had flown the first long-range P-51B escort mission to Paris. It worked barely. Now, just 5 weeks later, Howard found himself alone over central Germany, about to prove whether one man in one aircraft could make a difference against impossible odds. His radio crackled with static. His flight leader's voice should have been coordinating the defense. Silence. His wingman should have called out German positions. Silence. The awful realization crystallized. He was the only American fighter between 60 bombers and 30 German interceptors, 300 miles inside enemy territory. The Germans had launched from 3 airfields around Brunswick, tracking the bomber stream for 18 minutes. They knew exactly where to strike, beyond Allied fighter range, where the bombers were most vulnerable. The lead German fighters opened fire at 800 yards. A B-17 named Little Chub took hits in both wings. Another bomber, Hell's Angels, lost its No. 3 engine, black smoke pouring from the nacelle. First blood. Howard didn't hesitate. He pushed the stick forward and dove from 28,000 feet, building speed to 420 miles per hour. The P-51B's 650 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing, converged at 300 yards. He lined up on the nearest Fu-190, waiting until the fighter filled his gun sight before squeezing the trigger. The burst was perfect. Tracers walked up the German's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The FW-190's tail disintegrated, and the fighter tumbled earthward, trailing smoke. Howard pulled up hard, loading 7 Gs, his vision graying at the edges from blood draining from his brain. He rolled inverted, spotted a Bf-109 climbing toward the bombers, and dropped onto its tail. 3 seconds of firing. The 109's canopy exploded in a shower of glass and metal. Howard kicked the rudder, rolled right, and locked onto another FW-190. 3 down in 40 seconds. The German formation split. 15 fighters broke left toward the bombers, while 15 wheeled to engage Howard. Standard fighter doctrine was clear: never engage when outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Howard faced 15 to 1 odds against him. With another 15 threatening the bombers he was sworn to protect. He had 412 rounds remaining per gun, 2,472 rounds total. He was 37 minutes from friendly lines. The temperature at altitude was minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit. His guns would start freezing soon from the combination of extreme cold and heat from rapid firing. He kept attacking. The impossible fight. Inside the bomber formation, ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant William Thompson watched in disbelief. From his cramped sphere beneath the B-17, he'd seen P-47 Thunderbolts escort them to the German border, then turn back. He'd watched P-38 Lightning struggle at high altitude, their engines failing in the thin, cold air. But he'd never seen anything like this, a lone Mustang carving through German fighters like a scythe through wheat. Howard's tactics were unorthodox. Instead of staying close to the bombers in defensive formation, he was hunting. He used the P-51's speed advantage ruthlessly. The Mustang could reach 440 miles per hour in level flight at altitude. The FW-190 topped out at 408. The Bf-109 at 420. Howard would dive attack, extend away faster than they could follow, climb back using excess energy, and repeat. At 11:17, 3 Bf-109s came at him head-on. Closing speed exceeded 700 miles per hour. Both sides opened fire at 600 yards. Howard's tracers found the lead 109's nose. At that range, each 50 caliber round carried 11,000 foot-pounds of energy, enough to punch through armor plate. The Germans' rounds passed wide. At 200 yards, the 109 broke left, streaming white coolant from its punctured engine. Howard reversed hard, pulling 8 Gs. His vision tunneled to a pinpoint as blood drained from his brain. He eased back pressure, found another FW-190 in his sights. A 3-second burst, 90 rounds expended, and the 190's right wing folded at the root. 4 down. Mechanical rebellion. By 11:26, Howard's right outboard gun stopped firing. The extreme temperature changes from 300-degree barrels during rapid firing to minus 42-degree air at altitude had caused the metal to contract. The bolt seized mid-cycle. Standard procedure demanded breaking off when weapons malfunctioned. Howard had 5 working guns and 24 German fighters still threatening the bombers. He stayed. The Luftwaffe pilots were learning. These weren't novices. Several wore Knight's crosses at their throats, testament to their skill and experience. They'd survived the Battle of Britain, the Eastern Front, the Mediterranean. They studied Howard's patterns: attack from above, target leaders, extend away using superior speed. So they adapted. 8 FW-190s split into two formations. One stayed high at 25,000 feet as bait. The other dropped low, out of sight beneath the bombers at 18,000 feet. When Howard dove on the high group, the low group would climb into his escape route, boxing him in. Howard saw the trap and dove anyway. He came down at a 60-degree angle, airspeed building past 480 miles per hour. The P-51's dive was limited by compressibility effects at Mach 0.75. He was pushing the edge. His remaining guns poured fire into the lead FW-190. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds walked from tail to cockpit. The fighter rolled inverted, its pilot bailing out. A white parachute blossomed at 23,000 feet. The trap sprung. 4 fighters climbed from below, exactly where Howard expected them. Their BMW radials screamed at emergency power. Howard rolled inverted and dove straight at them, upside down, at 500 miles per hour. The German flight leader, seeing a Mustang diving inverted directly at his formation, broke left in confusion. Fighter pilots trained to expect rational behavior. This was insanity. They scattered. Howard rolled upright, lined up on the trailing 190. A 2-second burst. The fighter's tail section disintegrated. 6 confirmed kills. His left inboard gun stopped firing. 4 guns remaining, 600 rounds total. Running on empty. At 11:33, Howard's ammunition counter hit 100 rounds per gun, 400 rounds total across 4 working guns. At his current rate of fire, that gave him perhaps 4 more attacks. The Germans still had 22 operational fighters. They were forming up again, tighter this time. They'd learned not to scatter. Howard checked his fuel gauge, 73 gallons remaining, enough to reach home, barely, if he left immediately. The bombers were still 19 minutes from safety. The German formation was diving toward them again. He climbed to meet them head-on. 22 German fighters dove in 3 distinct waves. Howard hit the first wave at 11:34, picking the leftmost FW-190. A 1-second burst, 30 rounds. The fighter's engine cowling shattered. 7 confirmed. He pulled up vertical, using speed to climb above the second wave. At the top he hammerheaded and dove onto their tails. 1-second burst. A 109's tail sheared off completely. 8 confirmed. His right inboard gun seized. 3 guns remaining, 310 rounds total. The third wave climbed toward him. Howard was out of speed and altitude advantage. Instead of diving away to reset, he turned into them and climbed straight at the lead fighter. Both pilots opened fire at 400 yards. At 50 yards, neither had broken off. The Bf-109's propeller exploded, pieces scything through its own engine. 9 confirmed. Howard flashed through the formation, 6 fighters behind him, all firing. 1 round punched through his left horizontal stabilizer. Another clipped his right aileron. He dove for clouds at 15,000 feet, pulled the throttle back while hidden, rolled inverted, waited, then pulled up hard behind his pursuers. They'd overshot. 10 confirmed. 2 guns remaining, 160 rounds total. Beyond ammunition. At 11:40, Howard's ammunition ran out. Click, 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 empty chambers. The Germans knew They'd counted his bursts, calculated his load. 18 German fighters closed on one unarmed P-51. Howard kept attacking. He dove at the nearest Bf-109 with empty guns. The German pilot held course, expecting Howard to break off. Howard didn't. He closed to 50 feet. The German broke first, diving away. Howard followed him down to 18,000 feet, stayed glued to his tail. The 109 pilot looked back, saw the Mustang's propeller inches from his tail, and broke hard left in panic. For the next 9 minutes, until P-47 Thunderbolts arrived as relief, Howard fought without ammunition. He dove on German fighters, forcing them to break off their attacks. He positioned himself between the bombers and their attackers, daring them to ignore him. The Germans thought it was a trap. No pilot would attack without ammunition. They kept breaking off, looking for the other Mustangs that must be hiding in the sun. There were no other Mustangs. The reckoning. At 11:47, 33 minutes after the engagement began, the German formation leader called off the attack. American P-47s were finally in sight. The remaining German fighters, 18 of the original 30, turned east toward their bases. They'd lost 11 aircraft and 11 pilots against one P-51. Howard's fuel gauge read 11 gallons when he crossed the English coast. He landed at RAF Boxted with enough fuel for perhaps 5 more minutes of flight. Ground crews counted 37 bullet holes in his aircraft. One 20-millimeter cannon shell had missed his fuel tank by 6 inches. When asked how many he'd shot down, Howard modestly claimed 3 or 4. Gun camera footage would confirm 11 kills. More importantly, every single one of the 60 bombers he'd defended made it home. 600 American airmen lived because one pilot refused to abandon them. The medal and the legacy. 2 days later, Lieutenant General Ira Eaker, commander of 8th Air Force, personally interviewed Howard. The Medal of Honor recommendation moved with unprecedented speed. On March 6, 1944, Howard became the only fighter pilot in the European theater to receive the Medal of Honor. But the medal was just metal and ribbon. The real impact was measured in doctrine. Before January 11th, fighters stayed close to bombers in defensive formations. After Howard's action, fighter tactics changed. Aggressive pursuit was authorized. Hunt the hunters. Within 3 months, 14 of 15 8th Air Force fighter groups converted to P-51s. Bomber losses dropped from 9% per mission to less than 2%. The 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustangs, would claim 701 aerial victories by war's end, more than any other American fighter group in Europe. But they paid. 128 aircraft lost, 60 pilots killed, 54 captured. Howard flew 26 more combat missions, claiming 6 more victories. He survived the war, served in Korea, tested jets for the Navy, and retired as a brigadier general in 1966. He died on March 18, 1995, at age 84. The bomber crews never forgot. Men from the 401st Bomb Group tracked Howard down a week after the mission, some crying as they shook his hand. Staff Sergeant Thompson, the ball turret gunner who'd watched it all, named his first son James. Dozens of aircrew who flew that day would tell their children and grandchildren about the lone silver Mustang that refused to leave them. What Howard proved on January 11, 1944, transcended tactics and technology. One pilot in the right place at the right moment, with enough determination to keep fighting when ammunition ran out, when fuel ran low, when odds reached 30-1 against one pilot could change everything. He didn't just save 600 lives. He proved that individual courage still mattered in mechanized war, that skill could overcome numbers, that refusing to accept defeat could transform certain disaster into survival. That's the legacy of Major James H. Howard and the Pioneer Mustang Group. Proof that heroes aren't made by superior equipment or overwhelming force, but by pilots who attack when outnumbered, who fight when unarmed, who choose death over abandoning those they've sworn to protect. In 37 minutes over Germany, one man redefined what was possible in aerial combat.